In NASCAR, if you turn on the broadcast at any point, the most recognizable thing that you're going to see on screen are the cars. So you gotta know that it's going to be pretty important to have a car that is really recognizable and that sticks out to fans. And through NASCAR history, we have had tons of great and iconic paint schemes. But today, we're looking at the best of the best, the top 10 iconic NASCAR paint schemes of all time. So for this list, I'm going to look at the way it's viewed outside of NASCAR, with NASCAR fans, pop culture, whatever it may be. You're not going to agree with all my picks, I understand that, but I'm going to try and rationalize all of them. So without further ado, let's get it going. At number 10, we're going with NASCAR's first famous paint scheme, the fabulous Hudson Hornet. This is one of the oldest schemes in NASCAR history that anyone can actually recognize, and it's one that set it apart even back in the early days, the pioneer days of NASCAR. And it was the first paint scheme that ever fully transcended the sport. The car itself is a legend, and a big part of this car's legacy living on is due to the hit Pixar movie Cars, where one of the main characters, Doc Hudson, was inspired and basically was the fabulous Hudson Hornet. This paint scheme is known by all generations of NASCAR fans, and because of Cars, it's known by a large amount of people who aren't even NASCAR fans. So this one has to be in the top 10. At number 9, we have Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s Budweiser Chevy. Listen, the Budweiser car has been raced for a long time in NASCAR history, had a lot of good paint schemes, but I would say that the one that has really stood the test of time longer than any other scheme at this point is Dale Jr.'s. And the reason, in my opinion, is twofold. One, it's because it was raced through NASCAR's most popular era, where it had anywhere from 7 to 12 million people watching a week, and it was something that was a national phenomenon, so people outside of NASCAR knew of it. Then you have also the simplicity. The clad red with black and white stripes, whether it be stripes or a DEIE on it, was insanely recognizable to any fan, and it was something really easy for fans to emulate, looking at the Monte Carlo that had the exact same paint scheme on it that was sold to the consumer. And I think this was kind of immortalized through the 2007 free agency battle that Jr. had with stepmother Teresa Earnhardt, and the ultimate basically banning of this paint scheme after Budweiser left the team, and nobody could really do a throwback to it. So this one is definitely an iconic scheme. At number 8, we have Jeff Gordon's DuPont Flame Car. Making a start in the 2000s, this was the one that defined the 2000s for many fans of the 24. It also was the paint scheme that Gordon got his final championship in as well as some of his most popular wins through his career, looking at the ones where he tied and broke Dale Earnhardt's win record of 76. So it's one that has had great moments, had a great driver, and was always competitive. And on top of that, because it had flames on the car, it was very popular among kids, and you will see a lot of people that are in their 20s and early 30s who have fond memories of this car, as it was maybe the one that got them to be a Jeff Gordon fan, or got them to be a NASCAR fan in general. So this one is another one that is insanely iconic. At number 7, we have Alan Kulwicki's number 7 Hooters Underbird. This was Alan Kulwicki's 1992 car, as he was the biggest underdog champion in NASCAR history. And a big part of the reason that people love and remember this car is because it was part of the greatest title fight ever in NASCAR history. While it was also a very simple scheme, it was one that people could immediately point to and know that is the Underbird. That is Alan Kulwicki. And I think that in a lot of ways, this car was going to be famous no matter what because of the story of this championship battle. But I think that it was immortalized through the tragic passing of Kulwicki in 1993, as he never got to back up that title. With it being the Underbird thanks to Ford letting them take off the T and the H to make it from a Thunderbird to an Underbird, it also was one that showed a great amount of teamwork with the manufacturer and team overall. This car should be one that's never forgotten, as its driver should never be forgotten. At number 6 is the M&M's machine, and it doesn't matter which one you look at throughout the history of it. This was a very bright yellow car to start with M&M's, and it was just easy to spot on the track. You could always tell which one was the M&M's car, and it didn't matter who the drivers were. Kenny Schrader was the driver in the early 2000s and late 90s who had this car, but it then shifted over to Elliott Sadler when he went over to Yates, and then after that to David Gilliland when he took over in 2006. But the most success with this car has been, of course, with KFB, Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has spent the majority of his career with this paint scheme and color. While there might be different variations, it's generally the same paint scheme, just with touch-ups here and there. And it's given him the nickname the Candyman, as he's won championships and plenty of race victories with this scheme. Unfortunately, we will not see this scheme much longer, as by the end of the 2022 season, they will be out of NASCAR forever. At number 5, we have the Gray Ghost. Now, this was made famous to start with Buddy Baker back in the 1980s. The top being silver with black sides, red little trim here and there around the colors as well as the number, and the number itself being chrome silver. The Gray Ghost itself should be on this list simply for the name, the fact that it doesn't also have to be aligned with a certain driver or number or sponsor. Looking at the way that it's been revitalized in the 2000s and 2010s. Dale Earnhardt Jr. drove this in the 2008 All-Star race in his first year with Hendrick Motorsports, part of the Citizen Soldier push with 3 Doors Down. And then again in 2016 he was supposed to, before he finally did in 2017 at Martinsville as a throwback. At number 4 is the Wood Brothers number 21 Ford. This has been a part of all of NASCAR history, as just like the fabulous Hudson Hornet, this was one of the schemes at the start. But unlike the Hornet, this one managed to basically outlast the test of time, and to this day is what the Wood Brothers have as their paint scheme. While there's been changes in the past and straying away from it, generally this has been the scheme throughout the entire 74-year history of NASCAR. The red and white with gold numbers is synonymous with success, most famously driven by David Pearson. But like I said, they went away from this one for a while, but in the 2010s, they went back to this scheme with the COT, driven by Trevor Bayne. Ryan Blaney and Matt DiBenedetto also are some notable drivers to drive this, and to this day it's still being used, currently being driven by Harrison Burton. At number 3 is Richard Petty's Petty Blue and Red STP car. This car defined the 1960s, the 1970s, and even the early 1980s for NASCAR. It is the winningest combo in NASCAR history of colors, numbers, sponsor, and driver. And it's part of amazing and great moments in the sport. Looking at the 1976 Daytona 500 finish, the winner of the 1979 Daytona 500, which pushed NASCAR into the mainstream, as well as the car that Richard Petty, the king of NASCAR, drove to his 200th win in 1984 in front of President Ronald Reagan. He drove it all the way to the end of his career, and while it switched manufacturers, while there was different switches here and there with types of cars, the way the bodies were, it was one of the best schemes to be used in the entirety of NASCAR's early history. It was used past Richard Petty, still recognizable even if it didn't perform, and has basically been used into the present. So this one is one that is just screaming NASCAR in all historical levels. At runner-up, we have the Rainbow Warriors, Jeff Gordon's number 24 car. Gordon being the only driver on this list to definitively have 2 paint schemes on here. This became the gold standard car of the late 90s NASCAR and was part of Jeff Gordon completely changing the sport upon his arrival. Popping colors set him apart from his rivals like Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace, who both had black cars, and that was the way that drivers would look tough back then. But in pure 90s fashion, this car popped with color, it was completely different, and was the most recognizable car on track, and it was also the most winning car on track from the start of Gordon's career to the retirement of this scheme in 2000. It was a definitive throwback as well for Hendrick Motorsports, as William Byron has thrown back to this car multiple times when there are plenty of other Jeff Gordon paint schemes to throw back to. It also was part of the best season in modern era NASCAR history ever, and on top of all that, it has a great name with the Rainbow Warriors. So Jeff Gordon being on this list twice should be no surprise. Now, at number 1, I don't think it should be too much of a surprise. That is Dale Earnhardt's number 3 Black Intimidator car. Sponsored by GM Goodwrench, originally this car was actually going to be blue and white. But thanks to some intervention from RCR, Richard Childress, and Earnhardt, they managed to get GM to have this be a black and silver car. And this scheme, in my opinion, is the one that most defines NASCAR, and it most transcends NASCAR too. If you ask anyone to identify a NASCAR paint scheme, the majority of them are going to choose the black number 3. It's been featured in movies, TV shows, everything in and around and outside of the sport in the 90s and even the early 2000s after his passing had to do with this scheme, and it can be recognized by casuals and fans alike. It was used in other media. The biggest one for me is the movie Zombieland, where it's clear that the black car with a white 3 on it is an homage to Dale Earnhardt. It also is part of the legend of Earnhardt. This was Earnhardt's scheme to the very end, and when he passed away in the 2001 Daytona 500, it was retired. Though with no sense of finality and no throwbacks even, there's really no way that anyone can say that, oh, it's overused. This is a car that kind of got stopped in time, and NASCAR fans have always been clamoring to have that back. It defined what NASCAR had built up to, a man that had come from nothing to going and ruling the heap of stock car racing. It's simple, it's clean, it's crisp, and it's badass. It's NASCAR. Now with that, I'm going to pass all of this on to you and ask, what do you think are the most iconic NASCAR paint schemes of all time? Let me know it in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you to all my channel members for your continued support, and until next time, have a good one.